Good morning readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf and welcome to another Bookish Breakfast. So if you haven't been here for Bookish Breakfast before, essentially it's a short, unedited morning discussion with my cup of tea where I just talk about some of the books that I've been reading in the past week and just general book related stuff. But this week it's the first week of Victober, we're 3 days in, so I wanted to do something slightly different. I wanted to do just a general Bookish Breakfast to start with, and then I'm probably going to stop the video so that it's not too long and then do like a Victober special half where I defend Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which is one of my favourite Victorian books. And if you've watched Bookish Breakfast before, you will know where this came out of. It came out of a little video where I said, oh, what do you think about Tess's character? And a lot of people commented and had thoughts on that. So I've actually made some notes for that section. Whether or not I can read them is another question. So that is what it will be coming up later. But to start with, I'm just going to start with the general Bookish Breakfast stuff. That's a good, succinct, snappy introduction that didn't involve any rambling or any confusion whatsoever. So a couple of weeks ago, I was away last week, so I wasn't able to mention it then. Bo and I actually did some book buying. We went into a secondhand bookshop, which is always a big mistake, and yeah, wound up walking out with a few books. So we came out with a copy of The Hobbit. Obviously, we did own The Hobbit before. It's quite a favourite, well, it's part of one of our joint favourite series. But this has got Tolkien's beautiful cover that he drew, and like his beautiful illustrations, that's Smaug. So the old copy that we have just was nowhere near this this beautiful and interesting. So we decided to grab that. I also got a copy of Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. Got a beautiful copy with like waves on the front, because this is one of my favourite books, in that kind of general favourite books, maybe top 20 or so, definitely. And I didn't own a copy of it, so obviously that needed to be rectified given that they had one very cheaply. And then I got, it was ShakeTube at the time. I didn't participate in ShakeTube in any reading way, but I did buy 2 Shakespeare books, so you know that's kind of a little bit like participating. One is Much Ado About Nothing. I studied this for GCSE, so I do know it quite well. It's quite a funny play. I think there's a film with Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, I'm going to say. Hope I didn't get either of their names wrong, because that would be awkward. Which I didn't really like the way that it addressed the relationship between like Beatrix and Benedict, because it made it very, very sharp and bitter almost at times, but I just find it really entertaining and witty. So that's that one. And then Richard III, I have never read this play, but I have seen it, I think with Kevin Spacey playing Richard III. That was quite a good production. The cat is on the table, you know, she's not allowed to be on the table. I just pushed her onto the floor, sorry. So yeah, what I'm trying to do, I've got a complete works, but it's really hard to read and really hard to interpret. So I'm just gradually trying to build up a library of Shakespeare plays that I might actually be able to physically read, because they're not like crammed in really, really tiny text. And I just pick them up whenever I see them in secondhand bookshops. I've got duplicates already of quite a few of them, so I'm trying to like keep a better list of the ones that I've got. But these 2 were new ones that I didn't have, so that's good. So that was all of the books that I bought. Then I finished 2 books. I finished listening to the audiobook of Tess, narrated by Peter Firth, but that's for the later half of the video. And I also finished War Doctor by David Nott. So I've mentioned this a couple of times while I've been reading it, and both times I've been a little bit critical of the writing style. Having reached the end of the book, to try to offer any further criticism of this book as a work would be, I can't think of the word, like churlish or unchivalrous or heartless, really, because by the end of the book, the amount of passion that is evident that David has for the work that he's done, providing doing surgery in war zones, and also providing training to surgeons who work in war zones for the majority of their careers. It would be very, you know, to criticise what he's done is impossible. The power of what he has contributed is really quite amazing. And by the end of the book, I was really in awe of just the incredible things that he's done. And I would highly recommend it if you are interested in medical memoirs, if you are interested in people who do good things, then I would recommend it. He has his own foundation now, the David Nott Foundation, which goes towards funding some of the training courses that he provides in order to teach people how to save lives effectively, following bomb blasts, following shootings and so on. And by the end of it, I just had to go and donate. I will leave probably a link to that in the description below if you wanted to go and have a little look at his foundation if you can't read the book. But just the incredible work that he does, there's no analytical way of talking about it. He has given a huge amount of personal emotional power to personal emotional strength that he's given up to do this very important work. So he's a very impressive man. So yeah, that's a recommendation. What I would say, I think I said last week that because it's like it goes from surgery to surgery, each surgery is interesting, and by the way, each surgery is very, very gory, so if you're not into quite horrifying at times descriptions, just be aware of that. But towards the end of the book, he starts talking about the work that he did to advocate on a more political level for some of his colleagues who had been left behind, that were at that time trapped within Syria, and that it almost gives it more of a plot, or more of a consistent line running through it, and that made the last section really, really gripping, because you wanted to know how far he was able to succeed in his advocacy work as well as in his surgical work. So yeah, an impressive work. Then what else have I done? I've done some more reading for my tropical nursing course, so I have been reading some of this Oxford Handbook of Tropical Medicine. I would say if you're looking for like a handy medical guide, I would always recommend these Oxford handbooks. I've read quite a few of different bits of different ones, and like the understanding that I now have of malaria and HIV just by reading a tiny little chunk versus what I had before is really quite impressive. They're very, very good at succinctly explaining situations and conditions, so that's quite good. It's by Robert Davidson, Andrew Brent and Anna Seale. Then I have started reading two new books. One is Spitting Blood by Helen Bynum. This is about tuberculosis throughout history, and it has been really interesting, starting from like where when tuberculosis might have developed, and different like interpretations of the disease. In terms of like in my course, we talk a little bit about medical anthropology and how people have different models of the ways that they think diseases work. It's really interesting to see the repeated multiple different models of disease that people had for consumption and diseases based on what they call tubercules, which are the little kind of almost packets of tuberculosis infection that people get. So that's been interesting so far. Quite a few people said that it would be cool to have like a video on Victorian tuberculosis. I will try to do that, I think, next week. But I can't promise to know that much about it or say that much coherently about it. But yeah, so that's Spitting Blood by Helen Bynum. Unfortunately, I started reading this because I was planning to do... Sorry, the cat is running absolute havoc around the bottom of the table, and I think she's shaking the camera. I was planning to do my assignment on tuberculosis, particularly around migrant groups in Northern Europe, undocumented migrants, that I have a little bit of experience from working with f-a-s-t, the First Aid Support Team, with people in those situations. But I've been told that because it's in Northern Europe, it doesn't count as a resource poor setting, so I'm not allowed to do my assignment on it, even though the conditions that we see are really characteristic of resource poor settings. So I'm a little bit upset and frustrated about that. So I don't know how much of this I'm going to continue with, because I don't know whether I'm still going to be working on tuberculosis. Then also, as part of my reading for this essay that I now can't do, I started The New Odyssey by Patrick Kingsley. This is another non-fiction book. This is about migration towards and through Europe. And Patrick Kingsley was a Guardian journalist who became a migration correspondent, and she's really going crazy. there's a little piece of string tied to the back of the chair, and sometimes she just ignores it, and sometimes it's like, oh my god, string, I need to kill it. And today is a kill the string day. So he went to a lot of different locations that were associated with migration. So at the moment, I think he's just in Khartoum talking about the migrant route in terms of from Eritrea through Sudan up towards Libya, crossing the Sahara, which he is describing as like the second sea. And he does make the connection between people fleeing conflict and cultural change and war in the Middle East, and the Greek heroes on their way back from Troy. I think because, you know, you're a journalist and you have to make things sound powerful and literary. But it's good, it's really well written, it's really clear, and it contains a lot of facts. So my plan was to read this and then take some of the facts that he uses and then find other sources and work it into my essay, but this essay I'm not going to write. But I do want to finish it because it's really interesting. But there are so many other things that I also need to read. It's so difficult. Yeah, and that's everything that I have read this week other than Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So now I'm going to stop and we're going to move on to part 2, which is just going to be a defence of Tess's character. So thank you very much for watching, and if you're not interested in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, then have a nice week and I will speak to you soon.